You've had a phenomenal career. You've seen and chronicled the changing India, the political landscape, and one has read your book, so one knows the journey that you have, kind of traversed. But I want to ask you, if you were to look back at your career, what are the 2-3 pivotal turning points which define what you are today?
I think one of the pivotal turning points is the fact that I became a journalist because I was trained to be a lawyer. I did a postgraduate degree in law. I came back, started practicing at the Bombay High Court, and suddenly one day said that I need to take a year off. And journalism actually became my year off. I went to the Times of India. I used to write a bit, and that was, I think, the pivotal moment. I should have otherwise been a lawyer in a black coat, wandering around the sort of precincts of the Bombay High Court. That's what I was trained to do. I was not trained to be a journalist. So I think that was a pivotal moment. The second pivotal moment was in 1994, when 6 years into print, I come to Delhi. We're going to set up the Telegraph newspaper in Delhi. That doesn't happen. I meet Pranoy Roy somewhere. He says, I'm planning to set up a news program on TV. Till then, I only knew him from The World This Week. The next thing I know is that I'm on television. And I thought I'll do it for a year. Again, it was to be my year off. Next thing I know is that I'm doing 21 years of TV and counting. And I think the third pivotal moment was when I left NDTV and set up CNN IBN. Again, doing something new. So I think every 10 years, you try and reinvent yourself. And then I wrote a book a year ago, again, 10 years later. So I think pivotal moments come at times when you're looking to do something new and take up a new challenge.
As a journalist, I was thinking that you would talk about the moments that you have covered as being the defining moments, but you have chosen the turns that you have taken. How's that?
Look, if I hadn't moved from being a lawyer to a journalist, none of those defining moments in my journalism would have come about. So I think the first choice, as I said, was the fact that I think you take a career choice. Do you want to be a lawyer or do you want to be a journalist? I know friends of mine who were with me in the chambers at Crawford Bailey in 1988-89 who are today multi-billionaires because they are top customs and excise lawyers. And then I look at myself, and again, when I started as a print journalist, we got 1,500 rupees. Today as television anchors, you get paid much more. So I think it's just the turns that your life takes, which takes you into a completely different trajectory. And that's why I think those are pivotal moments. What you do once you're in the profession become landmarks in the profession. Sure. But I don't think they turn your life in the manner in which career decision, do I become a lawyer or do I become a journalist, did in my case.
While law is the natural entry point for most politicians in India, for journalists it has been elsewhere. But I'm going to ask you a question. You started off in '94 as a political editor of NDTV in that context. What was the learning curve like, Rajdeep? Were you familiar with the entire political ecosystem? Because you've really gotten into the with your teeth in, so to say, with lots of interesting events that you covered. What was the learning like?
I think one of the big learnings was I started off as a print journalist in Bombay, a city which I knew very well. And it was one thing for me to cover the Shiv Sena and cover Mumbai politics because it was an arena that I was rather familiar with. The big change for me was to move from Bombay to Delhi. I came to Delhi and hated this city. I remember telling my wife Sagrika, I'm going in a year. I mean, I was from a city where there was 24/7 power. And I came to a city where there were power blackouts. I came from a city where I had friends, college friends and new people. And I came to a city where everyone became a contact. I was in a city where, as I said, I understood the politics. And I came to North India and I didn't understand the politics. My Hindi was good, but certainly was not good enough to sort of conduct a full program, let's say in a UP or a Bihar. So I think the big learning for me was to understand that I was in a completely different environment. I was out of my comfort zone. And I think that made me work harder. I think the one thing I sort of take great pride in is that my Hindi is good. I will never forget the fact that Aaj Tak has carried live interviews of mine in Hindi. I did Shivraj Singh Chauhan the other day, and I was elated when the Aaj Tak editor told me, "Sir, hum live ja rahe hain." I would have never thought 21 years ago that I would have been able to pull off a live program in Hindi. So I think once you break out of your comfort zone in life, then you are faced with new challenges. And I think that was one of the big challenges, just to work in this completely different political environment, this animal called Delhi, where everyone is trying to bring everyone down. And I sort of was just an observer and just watching it. And I've always remained an observer, I think. I have tried consciously not to get into this Delhi, party circles, kissa kursi ka. In a way, TV is good. Because whenever I'm invited in Delhi for one of these functions, I say, Raat ka program hai. I've got an evening show. So I try and avoid that. But having said that, as a journalist, you also have to meet politicians. And I enjoy meeting politicians. So I think from that point of view, I think it was great. I didn't only have to meet the Bal Thakres and Pramod Mahajans as I had to in Mumbai. Now I was able to meet, all the big politicians of India. So I think that was another sort of great experience, just to sort of have a Narasimha Rao talking to you.
And it was fascinating. That entire era of politics has been fascinating. But I'm going to ask you, journalism is one profession, and especially live television journalism, where you every day come across your own ignorance, because every day you're learning. I don't know whether you still find it that way, but every day a new chapter, a new piece is opening up. How do you keep abreast? What was the learning like through those years? Because you were capturing slices of Indian history being made. What was the study that required?
I think there are two ways to look at it. One is the R.K. Lakshman, the great cartoonist, what he told me once. I asked him what kept him going for 40 years, since he was doing virtually the same pocket cartoons every day. And he said, I treated every cartoon like my first cartoon. So every day is a new day. I think a lot of that is about journalism. You get new experiences every day. I remember the first time traveling through Uttar Pradesh. It was completely alien territory to me. But, as I started going more and more often to Lucknow, I started understanding how the politics of UP worked, and it fascinated me. It was also, of course, a great time to be there, because you had Mayawati, Mulayam Singh, the BJP with its Ram Mandir agenda. But I think if you're willing to learn, if you realize, as you say, that you don't know everything, then there is a curiosity, which is the best thing that a journalist can have. I think a journalist doesn't need to be a PhD. A journalist needs to have a curious mind, an inquiring mind. And I think if you have an inquiring mind, I think that matters far more than being a PhD. I didn't need to be a PhD in UP politics. I just needed to be someone interested in UP politics. And that, I think, made me understand it better than, let's say, someone who was a PhD would have probably said, I know it all. And I still don't know anything. I mean, at the end of the day, I think every day in journalism is a new day. You learn something new.
Right, absolutely. What is the biggest mistake, the failure from which you learned? Because very often when you look back, you look at the successes. Is there something where you said, oh God, I really got it wrong, and I think I learned something from it?
I think one of the things that I was sort of was not very good at was the ability to do live anchoring. I was not a natural live anchor in a studio with jacket and tie. I was very happy in the field. And I think one of the big learnings was, how do you become a better anchor? How do you sort of, become more confident in live programming? And I think the first few times that I did it, I just wasn't up to it. I think 98 general elections was a big turning point, because that was the first time I was in the studio with Pranoy Roy and others doing live election programming. I think it was just about the first election that private television was doing at Star TV. And I think that was a huge opportunity, and I really worked hard for 6 days before that to prepare myself. I knew every constituency by the end. I had made myself a master at every constituency, just so that I would feel more confident when I was in there. So I think I had learned that in the first few years when I was doing live anchoring, I just wasn't trying hard enough to master the skills required. By 98, I think I had sort of more or less, my stage fright was gone. So I think I learned from that.
So that's more a challenge than a failure. Was there a mistake that you made ever? A story that you got wrong? A source that misled you?
There have been many stories that I think I've got wrong in hindsight. I remember I once, very tragically pronounced Mursoli Maran dead. Because based on a source from the Prime Minister's office who said, he's passed away in Texas or wherever he was. He was in a coma, but he wasn't dead. And we flashed it. And I remember the repercussions that we had, because, obviously Sun TV was irate. We were blanked out for a while in Tamil Nadu. And I realized the importance of not relying on one source for a really big story. And for a really big story, you need more than one source. I think that was one lesson, but there have been many over the years. I mean, when I did the cash for vote sting, and I suddenly found that we were, caught in this terrible BJP Congress war because we'd gone so close to the BJP, virtually allowing them to dictate the terms of a sting operation, that we didn't know how to back out in terms of being an independent journalist. So I think you can't get so close to a source, particularly a political party, where they dictate the agenda. I think I've learned those lessons, some the hard way, and you just try and sort of make sure that you don't do it again.
Which has been your toughest day at work, Rajdeep? Because I go back, and for me, after reading a large part of your book, it is the moment in 2002 when you come out of Narendra Modi's office after the interview and you're accosted by a mob very close to the Chief Minister's house. I mean, that, it gives you goosebumps even thinking of it. But in hindsight, what has been your toughest day?
Well, I think that day when that night when we left Narendra Modi's house in 2002 and accosted by a mob with swords who wanted us to pull down our trousers to find out whether we were Hindus or Muslims. I guess, from the fear factor point of view, that was a moment that I will not forget. I was born in Ahmedabad, so it was almost as if the wheel had come a full circle. But from a personal point of view, the most difficult period for me to cover was 92-93 Mumbai riots. Here was a city I was born in, I had grown up in. It was the city which I loved passionately. And to see that city being broken apart in the way it was, and then, I knew Shiv Sainiks very well personally, and then to hear the things that Shiv Sainiks were up to and then report those, then the Bombay blast take place. I think from a personal point of view, it was traumatic. It sort of, I almost felt like I didn't recognize this city anymore. From a fear factor point of view, you could argue that what happened in 2002, Gujarat was possibly a moment that I will not forget because there was a personal threat, but just in terms of emotional investment, I think 92-93 for me was the most difficult period as a journalist.
And what was the most proudest? The moment where you thought all of it is worth it?
Ironically, the most proud moment that I felt as a journalist was when we were able to set up CNN, IBN, and it was up and running. To be able to set up something out of nothing and then to see it out on the screen, to see it then become successful was terrific, because I think I've always believed TV is a team game. TV journalism is not about the individual. It's not about a star anchor. It's about how good your team is. So I got a lot of satisfaction out of a team which was being built and which was able to put out a channel. Stories, frankly, give you momentary satisfaction. You do a great story or you do a good interview, you feel satisfied for that moment. But I think setting up a channel virtually out of nothing was probably the most satisfying.
You've seen the evolution of the broadcast medium, Rajdeep. You've been at the helm of it. You've been riding the wave, and you've created that wave. I'm going to ask you. A lot has changed. There's been a proliferation of news channels. We have perhaps the maximum number of news channels any country can boast of. But as we have grown, the talent gap has only grown worse. And I think the biggest struggle is to find the right people with the passion to drive news. What do you make of it? Do you think we've grown too fast? Do you think it's not caught up? Do you think it's an ugly stage of evolution? What do you think?
Mini, I think we've reached a stage where there's a remarkable paradox where we've grown in quantity. There are 400 news channels and we've declined in quality. We actually did far more quality work 10, 15, 20 years ago. I remember when we were doing World This Week, we had 1 week to do one story. So you could put all your energies into it. Today you have to do one story in 1 hour at times. So where does the reporter have the time to think? Where does the reporter have the time to structure a story? So I think it's ironical. What competition should normally do is raise the bar. In a strange way in television, competition has done just the reverse. It's actually brought us down to the lowest common denominator. How do we, the concept of breaking news has broken down. Sense has been replaced with sensation. News has been replaced with noise, credibility with chaos. And I start wondering, why should that have happened? Competition should raise the bar. In India, in television in particular, competition at times has actually lowered the bar. I don't know who to blame for that. Do we blame the business model of television, where there are so many channels competing for the same sort of number of eyeballs, advertising revenues not multiplying? So I don't know why that's happened, but I think that is the biggest sort of, that's unfortunate. There was a wave, there was a revolution that was created, but revolutions tend to devour their own. And I think that's what's happened in India. The television revolution is now dangerously devouring some of us who started it.
But at the heart of every journalist who is in the business for the sheer passion with which he sees journalism or the story or the fact that you're making a change and a positive change, there's a little kernel, of positive energy. How do you develop that, Rajdeep? How do you get the right kind of perspective, the right kind of development for talent for the youngsters who are coming into journalism? What can be done in that sense?
I think what is critical is you need better journalism schools in this country. Journalism schools cannot become either sweatshops, or journalism schools can't be, let someone get a degree. It's not just about a degree. I think the best degree in journalism in any case is a degree called life. You learn more in a newsroom than you'll ever learn in a classroom. More than that, seniors need to mentor. In India, seniors are so obsessed with themselves and building their own personas, they have no time to build young people. I genuinely regret that. You need seniors to be there guiding people, encouraging them. I was very fortunate, both at the Times of India, where I had a great boss in Darrell De Monte. He gave me opportunities which are unthinkable for a young journalist. I was 25. I was allowed to cover the Rath Yatra. Prannoy Roy at 29, 30 was taking me on his live shows with him on elections. What more can a young man want? Which 29, 30-year-old is given that kind of space today? And I start wondering again, why are we not spending more time in mentoring? Perhaps because we are so caught up in our own little worlds, our own little cubby holes, that we don't do enough to encourage talent. So I think if we don't, then we are really again heading for a crisis, because the next generation is just not being given the opportunities.
My generation was thrown into the deep end and asked to figure it out and swim, and we did swim, okay? Yeah. But I'm going to ask you this. Today the opportunity to learn, if you want to learn, is also immense, Rajdeep, because you're exposed to the best media, you're exposed to great, stuff on the digital space. Can that be a positive change that comes around, where students can really, if they're interested in it, really develop themselves?
I think so. I think what digital is doing is digital is going to be for the next generation what TV was for us 20 years ago. Opportunity. At the end of the day, any profession, particularly journalism, is about opportunity. I don't get those opportunities in TV which I might get today in digital. I might be able to write a blog, I might be able to maybe do an interview, do things which I'm not getting a chance to do in TV. So I think digital, because it's not as costly, because the business model doesn't require you to put that kind of an investment that TV requires, maybe will encourage younger talent. So I think, and because it's going to become competitive, I think people will want quality content. Quality content is going to survive in the digital age. Television is getting commodified because everybody is doing the same thing, chasing the same audiences. In digital, you're going to have to create new audiences for a new India. And I think that will force you to think out of the box. So all the innovations that are coming in, the young kids who are coming in, are coming with innovations for digital. So I think digital will spur the same kind of innovative, passionate mindset that TV did 20 years ago.
One of the big game changers that's also happening, Rajdeep, is that digital is replacing the platform, is becoming the platform of choice for viewership. How is that disrupting business models for news channels, you think? Because, over a period of time, do you see that as a big threat?
This is like saying again 20 years ago that print will go the moment television takes over. I don't think anyone takes over from another medium. I think each medium supplements the other, and there are complementarities that you can build. So if digital grows, television must also adjust to the digital age. Every television platform will need to have a strong digital backend. Some may even need a digital front end. So you'll have mobile TV, for example, and television on screen will become a backend where you can have news on demand. You can watch a program at a time of your choice, but you can watch it all the time live streaming on your mobile TV. So I think the delivery systems will vary, but content will still be king. So I think whether you put that content out on digital, whether you put it out on TV, whether you put it out on print, the choice is yours. So I think content, there will always be a demand for content. What will happen is I think the delivery systems will start changing, where people will increasingly in this country go to handheld devices for their news and information. And maybe if I want to watch a longer format, or maybe if I want to watch a sports show, I'll go to the television. So I think each one will have certain skill sets, each one will offer certain specialized values which you will have to sort of work together. They'll all coexist. I don't think one is going to replace the other. And I think increasingly news is a service, which means I have to provide the viewer or the reader a service when I'm giving you news and information. I can't do it in some derive vicarious pleasure for myself if it isn't changing your life. So I need to provide news as information for a new generation. People want to be informed when they watch news. They don't want to be just titillated. For that, they'll go to Kapil Sharma and comedy nights. So that's also going to change. News as entertainment will come on. Entertainment will be Kapil Sharma. Mobile will provide FIR, quick information, and television will provide me maybe a longer format show.
So right now, I hope that happens, because right now we are veering towards Kapil Sharma in many cases. So I'm going to shift focus a little. What is also true is newsrooms are younger and younger, and I think it's going to remain that way because of the demographics. What do you think of the youth and how they're going to transform the business? Are you positive? Do you think they need to really skill up? What's your...
You mean the youngsters in the newsroom? I think, look, I have enormous admiration for India's youngsters' energy levels and their ambition. They are far more ambitious than I was. I joined Times of India. I was very happy to be there till the age of 60, frankly. I would have happily written, television just happened. Today's youngsters are very keen to know, where am I going to be 3 years from now? So, you have to admire that energy and the ambition that they have. What they need to realize is ultimately, to be a good journalist, you need to have a passion for news. And you have to have some kind of creative, innovative impulses. So it can't just be getting onto television for being famous. It can't just be being a journalist because, let's try it out. It should be also about your commitment to news gathering, a feeling of passion for news. If they have that, combined with their energy and ambition, then I believe they will conquer the world, because today digital is going to provide them far more opportunities than I had. In '88, when I joined, I had no choice but to join the Times of India if I wanted to be a journalist. '94, NDTV just happened. It was the first private news channel as such. Today, there are dozens and dozens of news channels, but there are also dozens and dozens of digital platforms coming. So look at the opportunities that have emerged between 26 years. You don't have to join just one place anymore. So I'm actually hopeful for today's young. They have huge opportunities. What they need to have is a little bit of patience and a little bit more of passion for the news.
I want to ask you a couple of questions on continuous learning. The fact is that, as we discussed, journalism is about really learning, keeping an open mind, and really soaking in a lot of information. How important is continuous learning? And do you see that as a big lacuna between the people who are successful and the not so successful?
Well, I think it comes back again to the belief that, no one has arrived in life, simply because you do one great story or one great interview in the journalistic context. I think you've got to see a career or life as a journey, where you will have highs and lows, where you learn from your lows, and you take your highs also with a sense of gratification, but without getting carried away. Success and failure are both imposters, and that's really true. You never know what tomorrow brings. I think you're right. I think it's important to realize that you have taken a career choice. You're not here to do a T20, a career is not a T20 match. Today's generation wants everything instant gratification. They want here, now, out. That's not going to work. You've got to be able to use each learning as a building block for the next challenge. So if that's the way you look at life, I think, and you call it continuous learning, I think that's the way to look at life. That's what the old, our old philosophers would tell us, the old Shastras tell us, that every stage of life prepares you for the next. And that's the way I see it.
Who are the people that have influenced you and inspired you along the journey? I know it's a very large kind of canvas that you can look at, but there are 2-3 people that you think really helped you along the way because they really inspired you to do better.
Actually, to be very honest, there's no one who I've said, he's been a role model. I've never really had a role model in journalism as such. I was very lucky when, as I said, when I was at the Times of India in the late 80s, early 90s, I built this great friendship with R.K. Lakshman. It was a strange relationship between a 70-year-old man and a 25-year-old kid. And every morning I would sit with him for an hour, we'd go through the newspapers, and I think he taught me the importance of simplicity of communication. I learned from Darryl De Monte, my first editor, the importance of giving young people opportunities, which I've always, I learned that from Prannoy Roy also and Radhika Roy. They gave a lot of opportunity to a lot of young people at that critical time. I learned from Raghav Bell, the ability to empower people, give them, again, trust them and give them opportunity. So I think around the way you learn from various people different skill sets. Was I inspired by someone? I'd love to say I was inspired by the Mahatma. But, when I read Gandhi and I say, bloody hell, how do you become, where did this man come from? Because he's remarkable, the moral courage of this man. I think in weaker moments, you turn to him, and I have all his, I read a lot, I've read a lot of Gandhi, I've read a lot of Ambedkar. Ambedkar, powerful intellect, much more powerful intellect than Gandhi would ever be. But Gandhi's sheer moral courage of that man. And it gives me goosebumps thinking about it. And I know that I don't have it, but I think it's important to sort of read and try and, understand that there were such people. And it inspires. I remember meeting Nelson Mandela in 1991 as a young journalist covering a cricket tour of South Africa, and then catching him at the airport and interviewing him. And I just thought, one thing that struck me about that man, he'd spent more than 2 decades in jail, but there was no recrimination against his captors. He was smiling. Every answer you'd give, you'd smile. And you just thought that in that smile, maybe that's the closest that I met someone who was close to the Mahatma. That's the way Gandhi was with the British. He must have unnerved them with his smile. You arrested me, jailed me, kept me in jail for 5 years. I come out and smile at you. You have no chance. You killed me. I know Munna Bhai tried the experiment in another way, but I think, those are figures who, should inspire everyone. They're remarkable people.
But, I'm going to come to a personal question. You've had some tough turns to maneuver, very public tough turns, and you've had to take a step back. You have had to really, walk a tightrope, so to say. What was the sense, how did you survive that? Or what were the learnings from that, really?
One of the biggest, most difficult decisions was to leave CNN-IBN. Last year. You set up something, you build it up, you've created a team, you're very comfortable, and suddenly the world changes. And it took me a long time to recover from it. I think I still haven't fully recovered. It was emotional, it was traumatic, it was difficult. And you realize that in life that, life is not one smooth journey. And I said this at an interview a few months ago, that I was really down and out. And I did 2 things. One, I wrote a book. So I put all my energies in the book. Someone asked me, how do you write the book so soon? I said, because I had nothing else in my life for those 3 months. If I didn't write, I would have been depressed. So I just put all my energies in it. And number 2, I was watching a cricket match and this Australian cricketer died on the cricket field. And to me, the thought that someone who had died while playing the game he loved so much made my condition seem so trivial in contrast. No one had died here. And I told myself, it's time to sort of get back to some kind of rhythm in life. And you get up. So, I think you shake yourself up. Time is a healer. But more than that, you learn new skills. I never thought I could write a book. People ask me, how was I able to write a book so fast? And because for 3 months, I did nothing in my life but the book, because it was my way of getting out of the depression I felt after leaving CNN-IBN. Had I not written, I would have been griping about it all the time. And then there was this cricketer, Phil Hughes, who died on a cricket field. And there I saw it and I said, a cricketer's dead, playing the game he loves so much. And what am I sort of griping about? And I think you wake up and you pull yourself up and you tell yourself that, life is a journey, and you have, not so good times and good times, and you embrace both, and you learn new skills. So I learned the skill of writing a book of 130,000 words, and it was reasonably successful. And I must confess that I can now at least go and tell my grandchildren whatever else I have not done. I've kept enough copies of the book, so if I do have grandchildren, they will all be presented copies of my book, whatever else happens.
Rajdeep, what is the next thing in your vision? You said you have this thing about having decadal changes, and from what we've heard, you've chanced upon very happy turns in your life, and you've embraced it. What's next?
I've been very lucky. I don't know what's next, but I'm interested, I'm curious in learning new skills. I mean, if you asked me in 94, television, I didn't have the foggiest idea. If you asked me in 2004, 5, setting up a channel, I didn't know how to do it. I don't know what it is next, but yes, I am looking for my next challenge, in a way. I think decadal is a good way to put it, because this is the end of that decade. So if I can, I don't know where it is, but hopefully it's somewhere. Maybe it's in writing a film script.
No way. I can't imagine that.
No, I can write a film. Maybe it's writing a film script. Maybe it's writing another book. Or maybe it's just, in discovering digital. I love working with young people. And all the young people who come to me now all tell me they want to do digital. Where 5 years ago they told me they wanted to do TV. So maybe their energies will convince me that maybe can I do something with them? I'd love to do that, but I don't know what.
What is your message to the youth? I'm going to break it up into two. Young journalists who look at you and aspire to be you. And second, to youth in general, because you have kids, you've seen them grow up. What would your message be?
I think to young journalists, I think the message is very clear that, journalism is not a one-day match. Life is not a one-day match, but journalism in particular is not a one-day match. You've got to stick at it. You've got to be willing to take the highs and lows. It's a great profession because no 2 days are the same. But at the same time, you've got to have that passion and curiosity. Never allow the curiosity to leave you, to learn new things. And I think that singularly marks a good journalist from a not so good one. The curiosity to learn new things. What is my message to all young people is the same message I give my son and daughter, which is chase your dreams. My son is training to be a doctor. My daughter's just joined law school. I actually told them, do what you want, but don't be journalists.
Why?
Because I think it would be unfair to them. My father was a cricketer, and I, for the longest time, just wanted to play cricket. And I just was not good enough because, my dad had absolutely no real training in cricket and yet went on to play for India. And I had every facility given to me and I was just not good enough. And I sometimes think that if my kids became journalists, they'd have all the pressures of, being like dad or whatever else, or my wife's a journalist. So they'd have that pressure and oppression. Now in their world as a doctor and lawyer, particularly my son, who's now already in his third year, he's in another world altogether. So I am curious to learn about his world. He's just come back after several months. So he was telling me what happens in an autopsy. And I was sort of looking at him admiringly. And I'm glad that way because he actually now thinks that, he's my pop in a way. He knows more than me, which is great because that's his world. And I think it's important for young people to chase their dreams and be comfortable with what they're doing rather than try and imitate someone else around them and, be forced into something which they really don't want to do. I think people should just, if he wants to be an artist, be an artist. If you want to be a designer, be a designer. Just be what you are.
To be fair, you actually succeed only if you love what you do. Actually, I think that is one of the things that all the people who are great at things that they do are passionate about it. I mean, those go together, I think.
Absolutely. I remember my passion and my love for journalism was born because when I was in college, I used to go to the Afternoon Dispatch and Courier and evening paper of Bombay. And I used to work as an intern for Behram Contractor, who was the editor. And just the sound of the typewriter and that newspaper coming out, I loved the smell of the newspaper and the sound of the typewriter. And it stayed in my mind. So I think I fell in love with journalism in a way that I didn't with law. And that's why I could have never become a great lawyer. I've become a decent journalist, I think, because I love the idea of news. I am still passionate about a story which is broken. And when I hear a good story, or when I sort of on election day, when you see a big politician losing, it's a great joy. When Arvind Kejriwal was getting 67 out of 70 seats, I thought, it was like, it was great. When Modi was winning 300 seats, you felt you were part of history. So when you feel you're part of history in your own small little way, it excites you. I think that excitement is what's kept me going. And I think that's important. You're absolutely right. You've got to love what you do to really be successful at it.
I want to ask you a last question. Online offers a great platform to learn like never before. I can pick up any course. If I'm interested in something, I've got access to it. What would your message be to youngsters who are looking at online? Because UpGrad is looking at really fixing the gap between skilling and what is available in education to really show the way.
You see, I think what online will do is what a classroom can't, which is a classroom requires often your physical presence there. It requires you to be in this specific relationship between teacher and student. Online, you can be your own teacher and you can be your own student, because it's you and your computer, it's you on your iPad, it's you and your mobile, and you're constantly getting this information. And there's an information overload out there. Then it's for you. The challenge on online is sift the information out and use the information which is relevant to you and your profession. But it's just such a great opportunity. I call it Google Namo Shivaya. If I had Google, I wouldn't have gone through all those books in college that I had to. Now everything's available on Google. It can make you look so good. And I think that's the challenge. How do you use online to make yourself more informed? And I think in that sense, it's the perfect education, because it is up to you now, not up to your teacher or your classroom to determine your quality of education you receive. It's an equalizer. It's a great democratizer. And I think online's biggest achievement is it democratizes information. So I think that's the advantage that any young person should take.
Right, Rajdeep. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Minnie.